is going to be your legacy?
Joining us on Legacy, the family business podcast today, is Bertie Matthews from Matthews Cotswold Flour. Bertie, tell us a little bit about Matthews and what you do.
Yeah, so we are a specialist flour milling company based about half an hour away from here in the Cotswolds. We're a family business. We're 8 generations, and we basically mill a really broad variety of different types of grains and turn them into a wide selection of flours for home bakers and master bakers all around the country.
So I'm assuming you started out in farming, built the mill and developed. The 8th generation is a long-standing family business. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it means a tremendous lot. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, but yeah, so we were a farming business starting in 1802. So the first few generations doing farming and a bit of milling. And then the mill was built where we are today, started in 1910 and finished in 1912. And like a lot of family businesses, it's passed down and developed over time. And, probably like a lot of other businesses you speak to, we've got a wall with all of the generations and the pictures that stare at you from the boardroom. And it means a tremendous lot because I grew up next to the mill in that village. So I grew up there. I had a very close connection with it. And it's been a huge part of my life and is now the sort of central part of my life. So it means a lot. And it's a privilege to be able to do it, but you've also can't mess up.
How many siblings do you have? 1, 2?
I have 8.
8.
There's 8 of us. So
8
there's 7 other siblings.
Yeah.
There's 8 of us. Yeah,
that's a good brood in terms of next generation to pick from. But how many of them are now involved in the business?
Well, sadly, none at the moment. Who knows in the future? So I'm the 5th of my father's 8 children. I don't know why it's sort of just me, but yeah, easy for decision making, maybe.
Who knows? That's only you can answer that question, Bertie. But in terms of your role then coming into the business, was it planned? What's your journey? The responsibility as the 8th generation is huge. You've taken on when 7 of your siblings haven't, so you've taken on a chunk of heritage history, which is important, but that history doesn't necessarily guarantee a future. So your responsibility for custodianship going forward is huge. What was your journey into the business?
So I like I said, I grew up next to the mill in Shipton under Wychwood, where we're based, and I didn't really think I was ever going to go into the business. I sort of thought it'd be one of my brothers, or thought it'd be someone else. So I'm the 3rd son, 5th child. So I went off to university. I spent 10 years in the Army Reserve. Worked in New York. Worked in London for 4 years before I joined the business. And I think that the reason that I joined was a timing thing. Every business has their crisis moment, and our crisis moment happened to be in 2017 when I was 26, and it was a real challenge for us. And I was about to change jobs into another job in London, and sort of came back to help Dad out for a bit. And upon coming back, realised that actually there's quite a lot of things that we need to solve to just retain the business, keep it going. And I think that the reason it was me and not any younger, because perhaps they were probably too young, and any of my older siblings, it was too high risk. They would have a mortgage or they had kids, and they couldn't take that risk. So I think it was very much a timing thing. But in hindsight, I'm happy it was me, and I'm honoured to be able to do it. But equally, maybe it could have been one of my other brothers and sisters. But yeah, I think that's probably the reason. Just at that moment in time.
And you came back at a difficult time, you said, but you've stayed. So talk us through the last few years in terms of stepping up. You're now the managing director, and your father stepped back. So you've taken on the mantle from the 7th generation, which again is a huge honour, but comes with responsibility and potential burden and pressure. Talk us through that process, how that transition to becoming the managing director happened.
Yes. I'm sort of trying to remember it now. I'm probably giving me nightmares, but sorry. that's all right. So basically, to be completely transparent, we we're a successful business. My father done really well. He's one of the first flour mills in the UK to go organic, supplying a lot of the other mills. And, he's very much successful when he took over. And I think this is maybe something that resonates with other family businesses. His experience was waiting to take control, not being able to make decisions from the generation before. And I think he was immensely frustrated by that. And he says it himself, and who can blame him? So I think when he made that transition, it was sort of in his late 40s, early 50s. And he'd waited a long time to get there. So I think while I've been in the business, I think he's done the opposite with me. He's probably given me a bit more free rein. That's been slightly helped by my father's now in his 70s, I'm 33. There's quite a big age gap. So he's sort of had his chance. And I think after 50 years in the business, you've earned the right to take the step back. So there's that part, which is not common maybe for other businesses. It might be only 20, 25 years difference. And the other part is purely out of necessity in terms of how the transition happened. We were done as a business. We were in a CVA. One of the first meetings I had when I came into the business was sat with Barclays Bank and them telling us that we were in a creditors voluntary arrangement in May 2017. I didn't really know what that was, so I had to ask them. I said, "Oh, that was a good thing, right? We'll probably survive. Everything will be fine. Yeah. What percentage of businesses survive this?" And they go, "About 10%." I was thinking, "Oh my God, what is happening?
What have I got myself into?"
Well, as I was saying, ignorance is bliss, and I think that perhaps if you don't understand the connotations of all of these things, you can probably be a bit more positive and blind going into it. But so that was how bad the situation was. And it wasn't anyone's fault in particular. It was a cumulative amount of effects that happened in the business. And we had to build up from that. But because of that situation, everything had to change. We had to change the numbers. All of our staff had to change. Either some had sadly had to be made redundant, but others decided to leave because they could see that the business was going in the wrong direction. So from going into business in 2017 to being made MD 3 years later was quite a quick transition, but out of necessity and a sort of a survival type thing. We've got to keep this going. We've got to keep the mill going. We've got to keep the business alive. So that transition was very intense, and we had to learn a lot very quickly. And then when we were coming out of that sort of bad situation in 2020, it was a chance for us to sort of have a blank sheet of paper. And because there's an age difference from my father and I, and he ended up moving to New Zealand just before COVID. It also meant that, I was sort of on my own in terms of that leadership role. He was on the phone and he'd come to board meetings, but going from high intensity to all of a sudden the intensity drops slightly, but the buck stops with you. It's quite a balancing act.
A big change in terms of career from being in professional services recruitment in the city, having a job in the States, you said in New York, and following your army career and stuff. So you've done some really exciting, interesting things on your own. So you've proven your mettle elsewhere. To come back and effectively walk into something that probably wasn't quite what you expected. It's a big thing to deal with, and you're still obviously still young now in terms of what you do today. So as a young next gen stepping up, you stepped up pretty quickly, and maybe circumstances helped because you had no choice. But you had to learn on your feet and transition and change a business model almost overnight to survive.
Yes, it's very beneficial if you don't have a choice, because then you don't have to make a choice. You've just got to do it. So, we had to change what we're doing because farming, flour milling, food businesses, if there are food businesses out there listening, a lot of that is very low margin when it gets to scale. And you have to really think about what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do. Not necessarily chasing competitors who are doing things like huge scale. How are you going to do something different? And the first part of that entire process, so anyone going into a new business now, if anybody's taking over their family business or anything like that, the very first thing is to absolutely square away in your mind, why am I doing this? And it might be I initially, but it then might be I and we as your own family. I've got my own family now. why am I doing this? Why is it important? Why is it worth fighting for? Why is it worth working 56 hours a week and thinking about it day in, day out? Like, is this actually worth it? Am I motivated enough to do this? Because I think if you're not, and you can't square away that in your mind, then every next step of the process is going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And the next natural step would be, okay, I'm motivated, it's worth it. Right, now let's prove that numerically. Let's look at what the numbers are doing in the business. Okay, where actually are we making money? Where are we not making money?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of model can we create with numbers and facts to turn the motivation into reward? And how do we build that model out? Then building a plan is absolutely essential. A strategy plan. It's not about the next year; it's about the next 5 or 6 or 7. And I think those first 3 things are really key, because it was very difficult in those first couple of years. I remember sat around the dinner table. My father had moved out from my mother's house, and he was living with my grandfather. And me, my grandfather, and my father were sat around the dinner table, and we would sort of have one too many drinks and talk about the business and what we were going to do over a glass of Armagnac. And I think that, seeing them and thinking about all the hard work they put in, that was a big motivator too. My grandfather was in his 90s at that point. Very strange. 3 generations of men living in a house with no women. It was so weird. So weird. Yeah.
Rolling back the years, going to your childhood, what was your relationship with the business growing up? What did your dad share with you? How did you get involved with it?
Yeah, I think so. The mill was literally, very near our house. You could walk there in 2 minutes. You could see it. You could hear it next to the house. So it was always there and ever present. And obviously that was where Dad worked. When we were teenagers, we did all the odd jobs. We were driver's mates. We would clean the mill. We would work in the warehouse. And I think when you're a young guy or girl, I think you probably think, well, actually, I sort of want to do something a bit different with my life. And I don't think my father necessarily sold it to any of us. And I've thought about this, because I've thought, how would I sell this to my own children? Should I sell it to them in terms of this is a good thing to do? And my conclusion is that I think Dad had his own challenges within the business. He probably didn't talk about them. And I don't remember him talking about them. I remember him being stressed. And therefore, I think maybe he felt he wasn't sure that this was the right thing for his children, because maybe he hadn't seen the true success in the early days, in the 80s and 90s. So maybe that was the reason. So our relationship was, that physical building is there. That's where Dad works. We'll go and earn a bit of pocket money. But that connection between that thought process and actually this is something that one of us or a couple of us should go into, I don't necessarily think that was made. It might have been made in my father's head, but I don't reckon that was communicated. And that's probably because of his own concern and his own feeling. I don't know.
Do you think that undersell impacted your fact that you wanted to go work elsewhere? Not even looking at potentially the lifestyle we've got and anything, or potentially I could achieve that doing the family business? Or were you just very much, no, I don't really know much. My old father, who I look up to, hasn't really shared the greatness of what it is. I'm gonna go do my own thing.
Yeah, I think in fairness to Dad, he was very encouraging for us to get a good education, work hard at school, go to university, go and do something. And all my brothers and sisters have got, brilliant careers now, which is fantastic. So he very much, that was his emphasis. So yes, I think that pushed us to go do something else, and that was good, and that's great. Now we've all done different things, and I'm really happy that I did do something else for a while and had different experiences, and I think that's only a benefit to what we're doing within the business now. That flour milling companies in the UK, a lot of them are family businesses, and a lot of the guys from the next generation, not all of them, and a lot of them, that's all they've done. They've not had that chance to take a step back. Mm-hmm. So I think that if I was speaking to somebody else who was considering going into a family business, I would probably say, go away from it, learn a different discipline, go and live somewhere else, take that, have a bit of detachment for 5 or 10 years, but maybe keep a closer connection of what is going on in the business in the meantime. I think it's beneficial. Not saying it's the right way to do it, but I found it beneficial.
And well, firstly, listen, I'm aware, and we've learned already what you went through and how amazing you did to save the business and keep it going. So it's a massive congratulations with that. One of the things that comes with family businesses and passing on to the next generation is shouts of nepotism or silver spoons, and having grown up, Bertie, we both kind of had that, and more recently when we became managing directors. How do you think you can manage that better? How do you deal with that personally yourself when those conversations start with friends and family?
You're always going to get that, and I think that going back to the point I was making about your own motivation, I know what my motivations are. I've got a growing family. I would like to move closer to the mill, into a nice house. I'd like to have some nice holidays. I'd like to afford them to go to a good school if I can. That's my motivation. What's going to fuel that is the success of the business and the bottom line and the fulfillment of the strategy. I don't really care how anyone who doesn't know me thinks how I've got there, because I know how I've got there. It is utterly irrelevant to me. And those who are my close friends know that too. And that's fine. I think the older you get, the less you care what people think of you. Do my close family and friends know what's happened? Do they appreciate it? Fantastic. Am I clear with my motivation? Great. I don't care what anyone else thinks. And there's always going to be, oh, well, you got handed over a successful business. And if we continue to be successful, which I'm sure we will be in another 10 years, there'll probably be more of that. But you know in yourself what's actually happened.
And you've been on your journey. You know exactly where you've come from, and you've walked into the challenges you've come through the other side, that you've put the effort into it. So you're in a position now, actually you've proven yourself, you're delivering, and you're now growing and moving forward. You've turned the tide. Was there ever a thought in your head as the 8th generation that's just come back in working with your father that actually this might all end now under our watch? Was that ever like to happen? Or were you so driven and so motivated that whatever you would have done whatever you could to keep it going?
It's a difficult one. It was absolutely, for 3 to 4 years probably, it was this cloud over our heads. It was honestly every morning, every evening, and there'd be periods where it would ease off a bit, but to be honest, it was constantly that the threat was there. It was a serious threat. So I think appreciating that is a reality that could happen is one thing, yet remaining motivated and just sticking to that process. It's like, working out your sums. If you've gone through the effort to work out the numbers, realize it's going to take time and you have to go through these steps and processes, you've actually just got to focus on that next step and that next bit. And someone far smarter than me told me that many years ago, could see sort of how stressful it was. And this particular guy, who was very helpful to me, said, listen, you've put together a really good plan. I've gone through your numbers and they're solid. You've just got to follow these steps and not get distracted by this, that, and the other. Just keep following these steps and you will eventually get there. And that's what we've done. And I think it's incredibly helpful advice, actually. If you put together a plan, follow the process and be obsessed by it. In the back of your mind, yes, it's going to be there. And there's not a lot you can do about that. So, yeah.
It's the elephant in the room. Sorry, and we talk a lot about strategy, and in a way, family businesses don't often take time out to focus on that strategic thought process because they're in the day-to-day. You were so in the day-to-day, but you had no choice but to think strategically, quickly, cleverly, and build a plan. So the fact you're now executing and it's turned it around, it's a phenomenal success story for the 8th generation to come aboard and add their piece at a young age to now grow and have the chance to now really grow going forward and build the next stage, and that journey of legacy for a fantastic 100-plus-year-old family business.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. Yes, so yeah, it is, and we've got a long way to go. And if you compare where we have been, yeah, fantastic. That has been a success. But I suppose there's not really an end goal. There's always things that you've got to do. So you've always got to find out what the next step of the process is and reformulate the strategy in a new era, which is where we are now. But no, it's yes, it's been tough, but we're happy with the direction it's going. But you've got to remain, quite on the ball all the time, constantly, and it's very difficult to do in any business, whatever career you're in. not let hubris kick in. Oh, we've had a bit of success, take a step back. Things change so quickly. Look at what's happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Whether it's, Cleenol or Matthews or any other family business out there, things can change. And I think if you have been through a tough period, you're going to be more resilient and more prepared for the next thing that comes along.
Yeah.
With you now running the family business, what is the relationship like with the siblings that are outside? How does everyone accept with you now leading the charge at the top of the family business?
Yeah, so I've got a big family. So I sort of wondered if they'd all come sort of knocking on the door, once we were doing a bit better. But no, they're incredibly supportive. They've all got their own careers. My brother's in finance, and other brothers in marketing, sister's doing well in PR, really broad careers. And I think they're happy with what they're doing. And I think they're appreciative of what Dad and I have done and the rest of the team. But no, they've got a good relationship, I think.
Also, on top of the everything that you are dealing with, there's the fact that you and your dad are becoming incredibly close, working incredibly hard together, building a very, very strong relationship, not necessarily a normal father-son, we're going to go football games together, but you've got this common ground that you two are just going, right, we are now like this, and our conversations are, congratulations and well done, or I did that and everything. And then it's not like you've got one or two other siblings that are just in the background. There is a football team there. There's a sevens rugby team who are and subs who are all there just sitting there going. And I think what's really interesting is family businesses do this. They grow, and there'll be one child that goes through and has that relationship and close with the parents, and Paul has seen it massively. And I'm just interested to see if there's any dynamics that's appearing that you have seen and just been like, well, this is how I've managed it. But what seems to be the case is you are so driven in fixing and growing and doing everyone right because you arrived in a shitstorm. That it might be completely different, but I was just interested to explore.
So the dynamics within family businesses obviously, are pretty broad. And I think it also goes down to what the rules of the business say. And they could be different from every single business. Some family businesses are obviously there to be profitable for the family. That's the main objective. For ours, I think it's a little different. The shareholders of the business are my uncle, my father, and myself, and one non-exec. And traditionally what has happened is if you work in the business, you get shares in the business. That's the rule that's happened over the last, which is different to some family businesses. Yeah. That's the rule. If you work, the shares are passed down. That rule could change by any generation. And that is that is up to whatever that generation decides. But I think that has been beneficial for the 8 generations that we've been around because those people are motivated. So if you want to take the step up to come into the business, and there are sacrifices, you can't go and have your very wealthy career in London or go traveling around the world and all that kind of stuff. You've got to be present. You've got to be there. You have to understand about farming and milling and business and economics and all that part. So there's a sacrifice. But I think those rules that a family business creates are essential for the generational success. That's vital. So you avoid those conversations and arguments.
And what do you think of that? Do you think that is the right way to run a family business and to maintain its success?
Well, I think one, it's worked for us. 2, let's say I had 3 children. I've got another one on the way. Maybe one day I'll have 3. Who knows? So let's say all 3 of those want to come into the business, and I'd love that to be the case because I think I will sell it to them, and I think it will be a great opportunity for them. I would probably advocate looking at, is there enough space within the business for all of those people in terms of their skill sets? If there's not, then perhaps diversification and diversifying into a different market might be an option, and letting one of them take the lead on that. That'd be another way to do it. It's worked well having sort of 2 family members in our business for a long time, but I think more than that would be challenging. And I don't want to offend anyone else listening because I don't know how many family members are in all of your businesses, but it can be difficult. So maybe look at diversification if there are more members within the family.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. And I think there'll be lots of members who are doing things lots differently and different ways to have it, where Cleenol, for example, is not like that and has always just been a structure where shares have been passed down through the family members. And I think when the shit hit the fan, that's where the conflict came, because there was one person, myself, who was working the ridiculous hours of running myself into the ground, and everyone else is benefiting from that, and it caused conflict. And I think with family businesses, you have that conflict, and normally you can easily deal with that with shareholders, where when it's a family business and it goes, oh, well, we've now got dad's birthday. Is this contentious topic? Yeah. Has it caused a bit of friction? Yeah. And it completely changes the dynamic for people in and out of the business.
So Bertie, I think for you, and you hit it on the head in terms of the responsibility that you have, but also the communication. So you've got rules, your family's got rules in the business, but they've clearly been communicated to your 7 siblings. So everyone knows, and it's been understood and it's documented and understood that everyone's on the same page in terms of you're running the business, you've got shares in the business, they understand that that's the rule, and it's easy. I think the difficulty comes when you've got people in a family where they're in the business or running the business and they have shares, but their siblings have shares, and there's not an understanding of the different roles of those people, and it becomes more complicated. So I think what you're saying is you've defined the roles, responsibilities, and communicated it to make it easier, and it has made it easier.
Yes, it has. It's so important, particularly in family businesses, for that to be very clear early on, so that people aren't running for years on false assumptions of what they are or are not owed. And I'm just talking from our business. Yeah, I'm not telling anyone else how to run their business. I think that is absolutely vital. If that changes, then at the end of the day, if you've got somebody in the business who's leading the business as a majority shareholder, and they've got enough power to be able to change that, then that's up to them. There's not a lot you can do. There are structures that govern businesses that you have to fall back on.
Exactly.
And that at the end of the day, that's what it is. It is a business. It's not a family fund. It is a business. It's got to be profitable. You've got numerous responsibilities to many different stakeholders, not just family members, suppliers, customers, whoever, the community, doesn't matter. It's more than just the family. And that's key. And we, the flower, Matthews Flower is in a village, and, we employ probably about 50 people in that village and have done for the last 100+ years. We've got a duty to them, because they're the ones who are actually doing a huge amount of the work. So that's key.
Place is really important, isn't it? In terms of just your family, but family businesses per se, they've been in for generations in the same village or the same town, the same city, the same high street, employing generations of the same families. That sense of belonging, do you feel that's part of the Matthews ethos in terms of that sense of belonging to the place where you are?
I think it is. And there's generations that have worked at the mill or on the farms in that particular area. So it is not something that we would want to or should move away from. We have a duty to continue business there. You could make an argument that the middle of a pretty valley in the Cotswolds is not the best place for a flour milling factory. Why don't you move it to a port or to a industrial estate somewhere more central in the country? Well, actually, no, because it's who we are. It's who we are as a brand and who we are as a business, and we're not going to move it, even if it is a little bit harder. So build in the reality of your story into who you are and the way you communicate what you do.
You are 200 years old. You are 8th generation, which is an amazing story. What do you think the success of the succession has been, and why Matthews Cotswold Flour has been around for so long?
I think we're a flour milling company, and we're surrounded by farmland, which is key. So first of all, we can get our raw materials from people that we know, and it's a really good produce. That's key. So the product is really good. The second thing is, I think in terms of the family, my father was a brilliant dad, as was my mother, and his father and mother were as well, and they were supportive, and they instilled a sense of work ethic and duty, which it sounds, silly. It's not. That upbringing is really important, to be proud about where you were from, what you were doing, and we're talking about having the community in the business and appreciating that. Starting on the sort of cleaning the mill and picking up flour sacks into the bakeries and starting on all that kind of stuff as well. So that is really important. The place is really important, and I think getting a good education is really important as well, because to deal with whatever the challenges are of that particular generation, the mill has shifted many times into what it's doing. It's always done, did farming. We're not doing a lot of farming at the moment because we had to make a choice in the 1930s: keep the farm or keep the mill. That was a big change. In the 1980s, we stopped doing all sorts of stuff. We were selling seeds and coal and all sorts of random things. Okay, that's not making money and taking a lot of time. Dad changed all that. And it's the same with us today. We've made changes. So it sounds obvious, but adapting to the situation that you're in. We cannot compete making a commodity product for the lowest possible price. It's not going to work. So we will have a broad range of specialty flowers, really high quality, working in certain markets. That is working for us, sourcing that from regenerative farms that do great for the land, communicating that to our bakers and consumers. That's what we're doing. In 20, 30 years' time, it might be something completely different, and the next generation might decide to adapt and overcome. So what I've got to do for the next generation is be a good dad, give them a good education, make sure they've got a good work ethic, and they'll be fine.
No pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Bertie, would you have joined the family business had you not had the call from your dad saying, I need help?
I don't think I would have, if I'm honest. I think if the business continued to be successful, maybe it would have been another one of my brothers. Maybe it'd be doing even better. Who knows? I don't think I would have.
Why do you think that was the case?
Because I had a different career plan. And I think if it wasn't for the necessity of having to stay and the severity of the moment, I think that I would have got further developed into a different career, maybe even someone else, maybe back in New York, maybe in Australia, I don't know. And I think that would have been me, and then I wouldn't want to reverse.
So that was the necessity to help your dad and help the local community and the families of the family business.
Yeah, and it's paid off, and I'm incredibly proud that I'm doing it now, and I have no regrets whatsoever.
Where does that come from? Well, I get the desire to help your dad. I mean, everyone grows up in a family and they want to help their family. But the desire to help other people is not necessarily all ingrained with everyone. Everyone can, be very more focused on themselves. But you sat there in that position. You've said it a couple of times throughout this podcast that you set out to help the other people, help the local community. Where do you think that came from for you?
I think, to be honest, it is both, Sam. That is a massively important factor. And I think when we were having conversations with staff members who were concerned or who were leaving, it's emotional. You can't get away from it, and you can be as cold-hearted business as you want, but I think it really hits home. And I think coming back to our home in the Cotswolds, I think when you take a step back, you think, actually, this is a beautiful area, and this is a great way to spend a career. And this can be if this, works out, this can be incredibly rewarding. And as a part of that, the community can be supported, the suppliers will keep on board, the brand can keep growing, and that will give us an immense sense of pride. But as we continue on this road, it's being successful for each one of those key stakeholders: me, my family, the staff members, all of them. We can all achieve it together. That's the point. That's what the driver. That's the driver.
And your father must be incredibly proud of what you've delivered.
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah, and I think he's done a great job too in supporting it, and he did an immense time while he was full time in the business. So, yes, I think so. You have to ask him.
Well, surprise! But as you know, podcast is called Legacy, the Family Business Podcast. What is your legacy going to be?
What is what a question.
Thank you.
Sam.
Great. Some would say great question.
Some would just say a good question, actually.
But so, as a reminder, we're a flour milling business. We grind grain and turn it into flour. Okay. My legacy in 20, 30 years' time, however long I'm doing this, will be if I can completely replace all of the machinery and kit, maybe even a new mill, and have 100% of the grain coming into the mill from a farming model, like regenerative farming, that improves soil organic matter, soil organic carbon, water biodiversity. If I can do that and grow the business to 4 times of what it's doing today, then that will set the next generation up perfectly with a modern site, with modern systems coming from a really amazing farming model that has an actual tangible difference. I can walk away and say, yep, I've done my bit. Now I'm going to go surfing.
That's a fantastic plan, and listening to you, I've no doubt in my mind that your plan will be fulfilled. So we wish you all the best on the next stages in the journey.
Thanks.
Bertie, thank you so much for sharing your story and being honest with the journey you've been on. We wish you all the success for the future. You've been listening to Bertie Matthews from Matthews Cotswold Flour with me, Paul Andrews, my co-host here, Sam Greaves, on Legacy, the Family Business Podcast. Join us next time as we hear from more family business insights from great British family business leaders, their journeys, their insights, and the challenge they faced. See you next time.
What is going to be your legacy?